All right, I now want to turn it over to our Fullerton presenters for the day. We've got Trista O'Connell, who was the SI coordinator for several years, is now assistant director for the SI program. And then also we'll have Melissa Riddle, we'll have a math senior SI leader presenting as well. So I will now turn it over to them and I will advance your slides for you.
Great, thank you, Brett, and good afternoon, everyone. So now that you've heard or seen from Fresno about the impact that SI has on course completion, graduation, and retention rates, we're going to talk about kind of the nitty-gritty of what SI looks like and how you can also implement it. Real quickly, just a brief overview of our program. We've had SI on our campus now for 11 years. We began as a very small grassroots program and became centralized and institutionalized back in 2013. In 2015, we were designated as a center of excellence for SI within the CSU system. And then most recently, we're very excited to announce that we became a certified SI program by the International Center of SI at UMKC. Since 2013, our program has nearly tripled in size. We now currently support SI in 40 courses across 15 departments and 5 colleges. We have on average between about 160 to 170 course sections that are directly linked or directly supported. We do have students that come from an additional 40 sections that we find out at the end of the semester. We do, on average, have about 120, 130 SI leaders that we employ each semester. And that number does vary because sometimes we do have several SI leaders that do SI for 2 departments or 2 different courses. We do have 10 senior leaders, and I'll talk a little bit more about them in a second. And oftentimes we have a couple of SI interns. Now, in talking about our program structure and our support networks, we do have 3 professional staff on board. We have myself, we have Chelsea Dixon, who I believe is actually watching this, who's our SI coordinator, and then we do have an administrative support coordinator. We also created the whole SI faculty liaison role several years ago, and we have anywhere from 8 to 10 faculty liaisons who receive course release time in exchange for their work with the SI program. So they actually help with the leadership and mentoring of SI leaders for our larger departments such as math and chemistry and accounting and so on. In addition to the faculty liaisons and our professional staff, we do have our implementation team, and this implementation team meets about 2 to 3 times a semester, and we come together, and it's myself, the SI staff, we have administrators, we have our faculty liaisons, we have department chairs, deans, associate deans, assistant deans, and also all of our senior leaders. We talk about the needs of the different departments, the different colleges, and it's really important because we actually get to hear the voices of the students too and from everyone. And so our program here at Fullerton is housed in student affairs under the retention cluster. However, there really is a true collaboration and partnership between student affairs and academic affairs. Right, if you can do the next slide. So what is SI? I saw a couple people in the chat that were asking, okay, well, these results are great, they're fantastic, but what is SI? How can I do this? And so just to kind of piggyback on what Julie Collins was saying, and also Mike Hu, is that supplemental instruction is an academic support program that provides peer facilitated support to students who are enrolled in traditional, historically difficult courses. So bottleneck courses, your key gateway courses. Supplemental instruction, it's not remedial. It's a professor or instructor-free zone. It's not tutoring. Our SI leaders are different from tutors, or different from TAs and GAs. And the best way to think about it, because oftentimes people get a little confused, is a teacher's assistant or grad assistant. They're there in the classroom to support the instructor primarily. So they're helping proctor exams, they're filling in and doing lectures, they're helping with grading. An SI leader doesn't do that. Their primary responsibility or focus is on the students themselves. And so what they're going to be doing is they're going to be going into the classroom and acting as a model student, and then they're going to be creating their own activities, games, and worksheets for their SI sessions. And so that's the difference also between an SI leader and that of a tutor, is that what dictates the nature of a tutoring session is what the student brings to the table. They either have a question on a math problem or a writing prompt, and then the tutor therefore will sit down and help them accordingly. But the SI leader already knows exactly what they're going to be doing, and so they dictate the nature of the SI session. In addition to that, the SI sessions are voluntary. I think Mike Hu was talking about that a little bit. They are open to all students enrolled. I did notice in the chat that someone asked about credit or extra credit for SI sessions. We do have, for our math courses, students do have the option of enrolling in the SI session for a credit, no credit, 1 unit kind of course or workshop. However, all students can still go to it. It is a voluntary basis. And so that helps some of our students with having that extra credit for various reasons. As I mentioned earlier, it is an instructor-free zone. We do not share the names of the students with the instructors until after final course grades are administered. And again, the focus, the core, the heart of the program is at the SI leaders. And we'll go ahead to the next slide and talk more specifically about the SI leaders. Here's actually is a big photo of our very large program. You can see we have a lot of wonderful SI leaders, and our senior leaders are sitting there in front. Our SI leaders are hired for 10 hours a week, and the 10 hours consist of the time that they're actually sitting, attending the course lectures for the associated course that they're linked to. So our SI leaders are linked to a specific course section or sections and professor. It's more professor, and then if they're teaching multiple sections or not. They also get paid for their prep time and then for the facilitation of their SI sessions. We do follow that UMKC model. You can actually probably flip to the next slide. We do follow the UMKC model, and so the SI leaders do facilitate SI sessions same day, same time of the week as the, not the same time of the week, excuse me, as the actual lectures, but the same day and the same amount of time. So they either meet twice or 3 times a week. And then they also do meet with their respected group for an hour and a half. We have our weekly meetings. The success of your program really starts with the hiring and the selection of your SI leaders. You want to talk to your faculty to get recommendations from them. We also have our SI leaders encourage students who are really excelling in their SI sessions to apply. We also recruit, reaching out to our campus partners, such as our various cultural research centers and honors and scholars programs. And we have a very rigorous and competitive selection process. And so the students do have to fill out an application, submit recommendations to us, and then we do interview them, because you do obviously want someone who is very competent in the course and the material, but you do also want to make sure that they have a tremendous amount of empathy, interpersonal skills, and creativity and understanding of different learning styles. So that's very important. Our SI leaders do receive initial and ongoing training. The initial training is required, and actually that's our 2-day semester training. It's required of all new leaders. The first day of training is for the new leaders, and the second day is for new and returning leaders. In talking about the importance of our SI leaders, as well as the training, the initial and ongoing, I can't talk about that without mentioning our senior leaders, and Melissa will talk a little bit more about that in a second. Being one of them is that our senior leaders, it provides our SI leaders with an opportunity for growth, particularly in regards to developing their leadership, professionalism, and mentoring skills. They really take an active role in the planning and facilitation of our pre-semester trainings. Before, it used to be myself and our faculty liaisons up there, and the SI leaders would kind of go into that mode of student with professor. And so now it is truly SI in the way that we actually practice this. And so the senior leaders do, again, create and put together the different activities. We have a senior leader panel that we have at the training. We have mock sessions, all of that great stuff. And we've actually have noticed a tremendous difference in the quality of our SI leaders the first, the second week of the semester. They're not struggling as much. they're really getting a lot out of the training, and they're actually taking that with them. And so again, the senior leaders, I couldn't do it without them. They just do a fantastic job with the pre-semester training. They also take an active role with our weekly meetings. And so again, you know, it's myself, Chelsea, the SI coordinator, and our faculty liaisons who help, you know, shepherd our senior leaders and the regular leaders along. But the senior leaders, again, take an active role in that ongoing training, which covers the weekly meetings as well as the observations. Our SI leaders conduct peer observations, and then we actually observe them as well. And so that initial training is extremely important, but we also like to cast that wide net under them so that they do have a very strong support network and system throughout the semester to lead them along the way. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Melissa so she can tell you a little bit more about the particulars of the sessions themselves.
So I just kind of want to start with, what do SI sessions look like? And I feel like a lot of people that are new to SI have a lot of assumptions about what they look like. Maybe they're envisioning group tutoring, or maybe they're envisioning kind of a lecture format where the SI leader would be at the front of the class, all the students sitting. So if you look at the diagram that's on the left here, this is kind of like all the dots are representing people in the session, and the lines are representing interactions. So this is kind of what people envision, and this is also what a lecture might look like. Maybe a little bit more of an interactive lecture where students are allowed to ask questions. But for an SI session, we're looking more towards the diagram on the right. So in this picture, you can't tell who the SI leader is because the interactions are happening between all people. So between the participants, between the SI leader and the participants. And we're really looking for a lot of collaboration. And that's what leads to active learning instead of passive learning, which is what they already got during the lecture. And this is where the SI leader really steps up in their role as facilitating this and encouraging students to interact with one another and not just look to the SI leader as the answer giver or the person who knows what's going on. And so the students should really be teaching each other. And there's a few different formats in which this can happen. So these two diagrams are representing a format where all the students are in one large group. But an SI session is usually very dynamic, and it doesn't have the same look throughout the whole session or between sessions one day to the next. There's usually a lot of variety. So another format that you might see in an SI session would be pairs of students. So maybe the desks would be arranged so that they're in pairs, or maybe groups that are slightly larger, groups of 3 or 4, depending on the activity. Or maybe the students aren't sitting at all. Maybe they're standing at the whiteboards with markers, working through problems or doing some other sort of interactive activity. So the idea is to get everybody really engaged, and the goal is to make sure that every single student participates. So once again, referring to the diagrams, the one on the left, there's 2 students that didn't get involved at all. And on the right, all of the students are being engaged. So if we can go to the next slide. So here we have some pictures of real SI sessions. So here on the left, it's a group of 3 students that are sitting down. One student has all of the problems, and actually in this picture the SI leader isn't in the picture at all. So the students are continuing the activity. The SI leader is working with another small group in the same room. So this is another goal of the SI session, is that the students are continuing to learn and process when the SI leader is giving their attention to a different group. They don't need to be babysat the whole time. And then on the right side we have another picture of a real SI session. So this one's board work, a different kind of activity in pairs. And once again, the SI leader is not in this picture. So the students are doing the activity and they're being self-sufficient. So at the beginning of the semester, this takes a little bit of work from the SI leader to encourage this kind of independence, because SI students also have the same expectations about what SI might look like before they have that experience. But as the semester progresses and everybody gets more experience, this kind of model should definitely be emerging. And the SI leader wants to evaluate whether learning is happening or not. So there's three main ways that this is done, which are the three pillars of SI. One is redirecting questions. So when a student asks a question to the SI leader doesn't just give them the answer. Instead, they use it as an opportunity to engage further. So they can redirect the question to another student in the room, maybe one that hasn't been participating as much. Or they could redirect the question to another pair. So bring two groups together to work together on a question. Or redirect the student to open their notes and reference something that the professor went over during lecture time. Or redirect them to other resources, maybe their textbook or so on. And by doing this, they can check to see whether the students are really grasping the information, whether they know where to look in the notes, they know where to look in the book, and eventually they'll learn to ask each other without, or reference their notes and all their other resources without the SI leader having to prompt them every time. Another really important aspect is wait time. So there's two kinds of wait time. One is when the SI leader asks a question, puts a problem on the board, or gives some sort of prompt. Wait time where the students have time to think about what the answer might be before immediately going into a discussion of how the solution might go. So giving the students time to think before calling on someone. And also wait time after a student says something. So instead of immediately going like, yes, that's the right answer, I'm so glad you said that, waiting, seeing how other students respond, waiting for them to say, oh yeah, I think that's right, or maybe not. And encouraging that collaboration and making sure that every student is being a participant. And finally, checking for understanding. So this can be done at the end of the session to see whether, during the end of the closing of the session, to see whether the material is fully grasped, giving them a final problem, seeing if they're able to work it out, or giving them a final brain teaser, or instead of having a calculation, maybe giving them a true false, some different kind of problem. But it's also something that's done throughout this SI session, so continuously. So for me, I'm a math SI leader, so a lot of times they're working through problems. If I join a group, I'm rotating between groups. If I join them, and I'll ask them, so what are you guys doing right here? And see if they can explain what they did. And if I hear the same student always explaining from that group, I call on someone else. Oh, hey, can you tell me what we're doing right here? And that's how you make sure that everybody is really engaged, and that they don't let the other students in their group push them farther along in the problem than they're ready to go. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide.
We're pretty much done.
Oh, we're pretty much done.
Yes. Do you want to add anything?
Awesome. This is the first webinar in recorded history that's proceeding on schedule. So thank you so much for...
So I guess real quick before I go to the questions again, just in order to have a successful program, I mean, you need support. You need support, obviously, but you do need to... We really have drank the UMKC Kool-Aid, and again, we try to follow that model as closely as possible. But having, really qualified leaders that you hire, and then really making sure that they are, they receive that initial and ongoing training is extremely important, because you do want to make sure that they are provided with the tools as well as the support to be successful. Thank you. You've heard. Yeah.
We had a bunch of questions come in while you all were talking and trying to categorize them together to make the most of our limited Q&A time. So we'll start off with just some SI basic questions that people were asking, and now's the time. What does a SI leader typically do in a session that's planned ahead of time? Like, how are they planning? What are they doing in the session?
I'm going to defer that to you.
So usually we'll have basically three main components. So the first component will be a warm-up, and then in the middle there will be one or maybe two main activities, and then at the end you'll have some sort of wrap-up to see whether you need to continue this material or you need to move on. So some good warm-ups that I use, I really like to use think, pair, share. So that's an activity where the student has an opportunity to think about a question by themselves, then they talk about it with someone that they're sitting next to, and then we talk about it together as a group. And usually in the warm-up, I'll usually use maybe like definitions that they're going to need to be able to solve the problems that we're doing later on. Of course, I'm speaking from a math-based perspective. And then in the wrap-up, so the main activity, board work is really popular for math leaders because that way you can see what everyone's doing. Or another one that I like is jigsaw. So you give different groups different topics of problems. This is especially helpful for maybe an exam review. And then after they've mastered their problems, they have some sort of interaction with the students from the other groups, and they have to explain to them how do you approach that topic. And then at the end, we'll do a wrap-up. A really quick one that I like to do is exit tickets. So you just have a question, they write down their answer individually, and they turn it in as they go. And then you check them to see how it went. And, if there was maybe some disagreement, maybe that'll be your warm-up the next day.
And we have a related question that you've already partially answered, and that's how important is it that students eventually construct the right concepts or answers as opposed to just working on doing so and making progress?
Can you repeat the end part? I'm sorry.
So how important is it, if students are working through a problem or on a jigsaw, how important is it that they get to the right answer versus just making progress while they're there? I guess this is a question about whether process is more important or results are more important in the SI session.
Process is definitely more important. Sometimes in my SI session, we'll do a really long, involved problem. I do differential equations and linear algebra. It's what comes after calculus 3. And it'll be a long, involved word problem. And sometimes we'll only get one problem done in the whole session because it takes 20 minutes just to make sure they correctly read it because it's a whole paragraph. And that's plenty because I'd rather all the students are gaining understanding about how to read the problem, how to start. Those kinds of things are way more important than getting the answer right at the end, or at this level, algebra. Because and it's the same thing with their grading when they take their exams or whatever. If you have an algebra mistake, 1 point. If you don't know how to start, 20 points off, So
great. And so our next question was generated a lot of interest, and that's Kelly notes, we are experiencing extremely low attendance in SI sessions on our campus. How do we incentivize attendance?
Yeah, there are many variables that go into attendance or what affects attendance. Obviously, we have our SI leaders promote, and they, do email blasts. We have what's called Titanium, which is essentially Moodle, and so they'll do blasts on that. They make posters, they do announcements, they do incentives, give incentives. I don't know if you want to share anything else.
Some people will do raffles, or they'll bring candy or stickers. Even small, inexpensive things can be big motivators. Tell your students that you have, the SI leader tells the students that they have to bring a friend. Do a gimmicky activity. So I did an escape room this semester, so that one was kind of gimmicky, but I got some new students because I told everyone we're going to do an escape room, and they were all excited to do it. So doing something like that, usually if your SI leaders are doing what they're supposed to do, once you get a student and they see how SI is, you can usually get them to come back. I think the biggest problem is getting them to come at all.
Yeah, and that happens sometimes, and sometimes what we'll do is if our SI leaders tell us, then that's why those weekly meetings are important, because we do those check-ins. Okay, well, how many students are you seeing? Are they coming on a consistent basis? If we see that someone is not seeing, they don't have any students going to their SI sessions, or maybe they're just getting 1 or 3, then we have them do a survey in the classroom. So, and this is the UMKC survey where it's just ask the students, are you interested, or how interested are you in going to SI what grade do you, expect, what grade do you want in this class, and then ask them for their availability, and then the SI leader will break that down and we'll see, okay, maybe we do need to change the time of the session. Maybe that's a factor as to why students aren't going. And oftentimes, we switch it and then we see a surge in attendance.
Awesome. So I have a couple of related questions about SI leaders. One is, what's the timeline for recruiting? And the second one is, what does training look like? Okay,
so recruiting, it's pretty much always ongoing. Right now we're actually accepting applications. It depends because, it changes from semester to semester, how many leaders we need for each department. In May, actually this year we're losing half. We're losing 63 of our leaders. So I'm in denial. I'm not going to be in panic mode yet. But we're always recruiting. We're always talking to faculty. We're always checking in with our SI leaders. So if we know that they're going to be doing a research project next semester, they're not coming back, we automatically still have them, start looking at your students. We start reaching out to faculty. And so we try to do it sooner rather than later, especially when we're going into the summer because students take off and then it's impossible to track them down and come in for interviews. I think you asked a question about training, right? Was that your second question, Zach? The training, again, we follow the UMKC model, so it's 2 full days. The first day for the new leaders, it goes over just the basic components of SI, the history of SI, what it is, how you do it. We go over, the issues of wait time, checking for understanding, redirecting questions. We have the senior leader panel. We do a couple of mock sessions. So a good example, a poor example, we have them actually create their own session plans themselves. They watch a lecture and then they have to create something from that. And as they're learning what SI is and how to create their own sessions, they're actually broken up into groups. They're actually practicing it. They're modeling the behavior themselves. The second day of training, we actually stole this idea from Baylor University in Texas. We actually do a theme. And so our senior leaders come up with a theme. We've done, what did we just do recently?
We've done, last one was Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah.
We've done Star Wars,
Disneyland.
Harry Potter,
Yeah.
Disneyland.
And so we do it by theme and we actually break them all up into groups. We used to do it by discipline, and now we actually have one person from each department. And so what's really great about that is they're able to share different types of activities, openers, closers, because someone from history may be doing things very differently than a chemistry leader. And so they go into different breakout sessions, and our senior leaders are responsible for a breakout session in each of these different classrooms, and then we have a scavenger hunt along the way, and they go to the different sessions. So again, senior leaders play a really important role in that pre-semester training.
Okay, so we have a couple more questions, but I also want to be sensitive to time with Brett. So we're going to turn this into a lightning round where you're going to have super quick responses. You ready?
Right. Sure.
Okay. Do you give out extra credit for SI attendance?
No, we do, I think, in a couple of our biology, and that was just, again, established from way back when. The only time we give out extra credit is we have very long conversations with instructors so that the extra credit, the students have to attend at least half the sessions, SI sessions, in order to get the credit, and the credit will not impact their overall course grade. So it goes into like a participation, because otherwise if you do the extra credit, is the extra credit what's boosting their grade, or is it the fact that they're going to SI?
Great. Have you ever done asynchronous sessions, maybe with a recorded piece?
We tried online. We still haven't worked out the kinks of that. Yeah.
Okay. That concludes our lightning round. Can we show our appreciation for Fullerton and the chat session? There's some more questions that I might send to you offline, and you might have a chance to follow up. There are also some more questions about faculty involvement that I think might be aided by the San Bernardino presentation that's upcoming. Thank you so much, CSU Fullerton.
Thank you. And if you have questions for Melissa, email me, and then I can put you in touch with her too.
Great.
Great.
Okay, I'm going to kick it to Brett.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks, Zach. And, for Fresno or Fullerton, since you've already presented, if you feel like answering anything in the chat, you could always just say, at Camby's, here's, what we do. You can respond to people individually in the chat panel as well. For attendees, we're putting the contact information at the end of each session. And then also at the very last slide today, we'll have all of the contact information for you there as well, so you'll be able to reach out. And feel free to reach out to me if you need to, and I can help filter that question appropriately. So again, thank you so much, Fullerton. Fullerton could have easily shown off all sorts of data, and Fresno could have talked more about what is SI, but we kind of tried to cubbyhole them and have variety across. So now we're going to go ahead and transition into an announcement or another reveal. So how to get more people prepared to do SI effectively at your campus. That involves training, professional development. So we are now, as of this week, able to announce that we have training being offered August 2nd through 3rd at San Jose State University. We tried to select a northern region and a southern region so that as many people as possible would have reasonable access to attending. So San Jose State is graciously hosting on August 2nd and 3rd, and we'll have UMKC trainers coming out to deliver that 2-day training. This is for supervisors / coordinators, staff, and faculty as well. And the Chancellor's Office will be paying for the cost of training and materials, which can normally be about $875, plus a trip to UMKC and all the expenses involved there. The expenses that participants will have is finding their own mode of travel, the expenses involved for that, lodging if you need to spend the night, depending on your location, and any meals during transit. We'll take care of in-training hospitality. So you can do this for as little as, let's say, $100 if you're very local, to just a few $100s of travel if you do need to spend the night. We'll be doing the same thing in Southern California. Thank you, CSU Fullerton, our Center of Excellence, for agreeing to host, and we're still pinning down the 2 dates during the week of August 6th. So look for more announcements. We hope to get that announced by April 20th, within 2 weeks, and probably a registration deadline of May 31st. We have 25 slots at each training, so those could fill pretty quickly. But that's what we're able to offer for summer, and then if there's more demand, then we'll certainly look at following up on that. January is probably the next time where people are available as far as faculty calendars and whatnot.